Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to Conversations in Pop Culture, and we are back in the saddle once again for another season. And I do want to remind everybody that this episode is brought to you by my friend Preston Poulter, who runs Pocket Jack Comics. And right now, if you go to pocketjackcomics.com, you can actually get 3 issues in PDF form of all of his comics, so you can actually read some of what he puts out, and you can see if you like it. And then if you like it, you should go buy it in PDF form or any form you so choose. And he does a lot of cool stuff, and he's got a lot of cool variants and a bunch of cool stuff out there. So definitely go check that out if you want to read some free comics and see what you like. But enough about that, because I have with me legendary comic creator Chen, who has worked for DC Comics, Marvel, Zenescope, Valiant, a few others. I think you've done some independent work, and you've done pretty much everything in comics on art side stuff. And now you're doing your own project with a very cool book called Evermind. But before we get into Evermind and some of that, why don't you quickly introduce who you are exactly? Because I think I gave you a good introduction, but I'm sure I missed something somewhere in that introduction.
Okay. Well, first off, thanks for having me on the show. So I have been drawing comics for about maybe 30 years now, or at least a quarter century. Started out at Valiant Comics, and then kind of moved to I guess the big moment for me was getting on Iron Man during Heroes Return. And I did that for a few years. Yeah, that one right there. And from there, I bounced around in Marvel for a while on all different books, a little bit of X-Men, a little Avengers, Elektra, and I did X-Men the End, which is like the 18-issue long story written by Chris Claremont. And then I did some for DC, and then I took off for a while to do advertising illustration storyboards for commercials, and then I kind of felt like I really missed comics, so I kind of came back and kind of bounced around and at the companies for a little while before deciding to kind of strike out on my own as a writer and put together Evermind. So that pretty much catches us up to where we are now.
Yeah, and I know that you've done a bunch of interviews, and I don't want to go through your whole Marvel DC career, because I actually do want to talk about Evermind. And I know that I think this is your first Kickstarter that you created, if I'm not mistaken. And so what is the basic concept? Because people are going to be hearing about it for the very first time. They'll be like, hey, what is Evermind? What is it not? So what is the basic concept for those who are hearing about it for the first time?
Okay. In the broadest sense, it's a sci-fi story. And it's familiar in lots of ways. It feels a lot like Westworld, and might have a little bit of like Jurassic Park stuff in there. It's so similar to a lot of things, but then also different from anything else out there. So my big thing is, like, if you look at a lot of the superhero movies and a lot of the stories out there right now, there seems to be like a lot of playing it safe by kind of regurgitating or redoing things that have been successful in the past. And there's a bit of a sameness out there, and I think people are getting kind of tired. There's like a little bit of superhero fatigue going on. So this is a story that has like a lot of very interesting ideas, like maybe 3 or 4 big ideas. And I did my best to write it in a way where all of these unusual ideas get handled with good storytelling basics and constructs, so that even though it's a big new idea, it still gets pulled off well, so it doesn't end up being just like a big old head scratcher. Because when you take a big swing, like story wise, it could fall flat, because you really don't know how to approach it unless you kind of modeled after something in the past, unless you really know what you're doing as a writer. So I can tell you in the general sense, it's about this really brilliant scientist who has this who's like really obsessed with achieving greatness. So he has this technological breakthrough that he kind of unleashes onto the world, sort of like opening a Pandora's box. That so this technology, I mean, it's kind of a little bit tricky to explain, but in the end, like it's not a good thing to put out into the world. But since he's so hell bent on success, he goes through with it, and then in order to he does eventually have to kind of put everything back inside the box, and goes to extreme lengths to do that, including using the technology on himself. So it's interesting story that way. And in the end, it's really a character story about the scientist's relationship with his daughter, and sort of like with Steve Jobs and his daughter, they had like a bit of an estranged relationship. So they have this big gulf between them, and it's about really them coming together. So I think it's a really interesting story that has cool
let's
ideas.
dive a little bit. Let's dive a little bit into it, because obviously we have a scientist called Lucas Zhang, and he develops, kind of this technology. It's sort of a Neuralink type technology, and kind of bridges, I guess, conscious into other beings and expands what the human mind can connect to. And obviously, what winds up happening is that he sort of sells parts of it or leases out parts of it to an amusement park, but then that's really for something else. And then there's some adult stuff in there, and then there's some military stuff in there. And all of this is kind of, I guess, colliding, where you have the entertainment and this joyful component with the use of technology, I guess, for pleasure and for some bad stuff, but not necessarily anybody getting hurt to legitly war, it being used for war. And that's in play. And then it's kind of sort of some shady stuff's going on. And then obviously that's kind of, I think, where this is going. And obviously, I mean, it's very relevant to today, because we are very much a technology-based society. And there's been plenty of technology that has been unleashed that I think fast forward in 30, 40 years from now, we are going to look back and say that was not the best thing that we unleashed. I mean, there's stuff talks about TikTok not being necessarily good to be unleashed on the world. You can make AI, social media collectively. I don't know if it's going to be a good thing or a bad thing, because it obviously has positives and negatives. And so what is that like to write something that is extremely topical? Because I've only seen a few of the preview pages, and just even from the Kickstarter itself, I get a sense saying, hey, this seems very topical for my generation. I'm 30, so this is like my generation's problem in certain ways. And so for me, it's very topical. And I think even who's 40 or even somebody who's 20 is going to be easy to relate. I think that if you're 70 or 80, you're like, those kids.
Right. So I think all the greatest sci-fi has some sort of allegory to what's going on in our current times. So there is like a discussion with going on with AI. So much of this technology is done because we can do it. Like it kind of technology lets you know when you're able to achieve it, and then we don't really ask before we ask whether we should do it or not. We ask well, how can we monetize it? And if that if that question gets answered in the positive, then we just go ahead and do it. So that's kind of what the story is about. I mean, this guy, he has a goal of becoming really successful and becoming achieving greatness, and he finds that his way to do it is to leverage this technology. And this technology, he never really asked whether he should, because his vision's kind of clouded. So all of those uses of his technology, like you mentioned, in the theme park for the entertainment, can also be very useful in the military for fighting, because this technology has lots of different uses. And his justification for doing that is just basically to make money. And the reason he wants to make money is for his next level evolution of this technology. Let's say like if his technology allows you to inhabit a robot from, kind of like an avatar, where you can get into the spot and control a being while you're in this kind of semi-conscious state. So you kind of emerge or wake up as this kind of a robot, and you kind of do a shift there, do whatever you need to do your job, whether it's entertainment or military. And then when you're done, you come out. Well, he thought that one step further of this would be when you're in that robot body, like if your human body were to die because of old age or from disease, that you can actually continue living in this artificial body and potentially live forever. So what he's doing is kind of knocking on the door of immortality. And that research is very expensive. So he's leveraging all of these activations to kind of fund it. And unfortunately, all these activations have an ugly side that's really starting to collide and fall apart. So once he realizes that he's been kind of heading down the wrong path, he's gone down way too far and has to go through some extreme lengths to kind of put everything back together again.
See, it's interesting because obviously, I mean, this deals with ethics of technology, ethics of development, because here we have somebody who just wants to expand the technology, and obviously they're interested in money, but they're not interested in money directly. They just want to further develop the technology.
Right.
And obviously Lucas isn't really looking at the consequences. And I'm not too sure if Lucas, obviously for being a brilliant scientist, I mean, my take is that Lucas must know that there is an ugly side to this, but there's also the
Right.
positive side. And Lucas obviously has Lucas's own objective here.
Right.
And I'm pretty sure it obviously has to do with immortality, living forever, being connected further, along with other things that might have happened that caused this even idea to spurt. But
Right.
it's really interesting because it's developed for A, it's being used for B, and then B and C, and then there's consequences for all this. And it's fascinating because obviously, when you're writing a story like this, you kind of need to know where you're going, and you're weaving in and out of a minefield because one wrong
Yeah.
step and this thing is going to fall apart in on itself. And so, what is that like? Because it really is tricky to write like this.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, if you set a high bar for your writing, there's like two types of writing. There's like a situational type story, and then there's like a story type of story. And 90% of all comics out there are kind of like situational, which is, one action leads to another, and then it's just a sequence of events where it doesn't have any type of like overall controlling idea. It's just a series of events. So if you're a person that writes from the point of theme, like if you ask the philosophical question of whether a groundbreaking technology should be used, or the biggest theme in here is it okay to achieve greatness at any cost, or is it better to live an ordinary life and just be close with your family? Because as you mentioned, like the scientist, he's heading down a path with science that's kind of can be very exploitative and very dangerous. His daughter just so happens to be, a lot of times young girls can be very idealistic. So she's actually an activist and the cause for her group is the responsible use of technology by corporations so it doesn't bring harm to people. And so you can kind of see that they're really on opposite sides of the spectrum. And that's kind of like the biggest, widest gulf between them. So it's really a story about them kind of coming together, where she's sort of, as a mentor figure, is kind of pointing the way of where he should go to become a better person. And then hopefully, by the end, they'll get together and on the same page. But yeah, it is very hard juggling these themes because these are very heavy philosophical questions that are existential in nature. So you can't handle them lightly. So yeah, I mean, it did take a long time to write this because the stakes are very high.
I mean, obviously, there's two more questions I want to ask about this. Obviously, I mean, when you're dealing with philosophical questions and you're dealing with things, I mean, those are not safe territories. And I don't even mean politically, I mean just on a story level, because
Yeah.
if you ask a question about, the quest for immortality, right? If people are going on a quest for immortality and then they could achieve immortality or they could turn back, and they've traveled through, a masterful of dungeons to get it, and you're playing D&D, and that's the end goal. Do you like, that's a very complicated question, saying, do I really want to live forever? Or better yet, if 10 people can live forever, but you then have to go and watch everybody around you die. I was just watching The Old Guard on Netflix, and it raises a really good question where these bunch of individuals are now living forever. And one of the characters says, I could finally die, where he's watched his entire family die.
Yeah.
And so he wanted to hand over his entire group. Sorry, I ruined the movie, guys. It's been out for 2 years.
Right.
You didn't see it yet. I'm sorry. The written part of it's been out for like 6 or 7. So you're late to the party. I'm sorry. But he wanted, this corporation says, could potentially get everybody immortality, and that means they could technically also end immortality, and he wants to die because he's watched his whole family die. And that's so interesting because that can either hit or miss right now in comics and in storytelling, because sometimes people just want the basics and they don't want that. But also, you were saying that people are getting relatively sick and tired of superheroes. I mean, I think we've seen that with superhero movies. I think we've seen it with comics and superheroes. Not every single one. There are some that are doing great, but honestly, Marvel and DC, for my position, are really, really, I think they're losing their audience in the comic side of things. And I don't even think it's part of it is storytelling, part of it's art, but I don't even think it's that. I just think that the whole genre is just exhausted out at this point, and people want something deeper, but also there's also a bunch of meta ideas that just fail. I mean, on Kickstarter alone, I could point to 50 of them off the top of my head. Not that we're going to do it. I want to make it crystal clear, but I've read a bunch of books that had a great concept but didn't deliver. So what is that like for you? Because coming out swinging that way can be terrifying, especially coming out of those companies where you did do all this superhero stuff, and a lot of your art is known for that.
Well, I guess the idea is the superhero stuff really, at its heart, it's a male power fantasy. So when you're young, it's common to have a male power fantasy because you're not that powerful, so you fantasize about having power. But then, as you grow up, you get older, that might lose its grip on you because you are an adult now. And then, so it's other types of stories.
I still want to be Superman.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
I'm putting my name in the hat. If he steps down, I'll still
Yeah. So I just thought that science fiction was just more interesting to me. And, I love working for more, like the best things to draw are superhero stories because they're so visual. And then I like drawing anatomy. So you get to draw women who look a certain way and men who look a certain way. And it's great to draw that stuff because it's the best, most fun thing to draw if you're like I think so as an artist. I actually didn't enjoy too much of my time on Iron Man because all of that's all covered up in armor. I just like drawing human anatomy a lot. So in the beginning, I wasn't that good as an artist. So they had to cover it up by giving me a book that the guy's all covered up in, like with a machine. So yeah, I mean, I think, there's someone, I think Mark Millar said that we need Marvel and DC to be healthy. And it's a very tough thing to get them to be, I don't know if it's back to where they could be or just to capitalize on what their potential could be. It's going to be very difficult, but I do think it's worth just not dumping on them because if they go down, I think all of us kind of going to go down with them. So as an independent, I do need them to be strong. Yeah.
I do want to touch upon this because I don't think it's good that Marvel and DC are struggling. But I've also said this where I actually think they're the smartest companies in the world because I think that they've come to a conclusion that, and I get shit for this, by the way. People think I'm wrong on this, but I think that they've come to the conclusion saying, what are their top winners and what are their top sellers? Comic books right now are not a top seller. They're not a top product. What is a top product for Marvel and DC is a video game. I mean, legitimately, yesterday, for those who don't know, Activision was sold to Microsoft for $69 billion, making one of the largest media acquisitions in the last 10 years. So, I mean, at a certain point, I think Marvel and DC have gone saying, we want more video games, we want more movies, we want more animation stuff. And I think that that's part of the problem. And I think that they're just testing ideas in comics. Yeah. And I think that they're following the money right now. So I think that part of the problem isn't even so much that there is a problem with writing or even fans. I think that the largest form of entertainment right now is video games by far. And then second two or three are sports, anime, and some other stuff. And so I think part of the problem is that there's been a culture shift in it. And it's actually alarming because if you're an indie comic creator, if Marvel and DC, who have a lot of money, are struggling, how the hell are you going to make it? You know what I mean? If you're doing your Kickstarter on that and you say, oh, but Kickstarter fans are different than Marvel and DC, but not by much, at least in my opinion. And I'm going to get shit for it. And I know I am because people disagree with me on that premise. But I'm curious what you think, because and feel free to disagree with me because I am always happy to have an open discussion.
Well, I think the greatest thing about comics is you can tell any type of story practically, and then you can see the correlation between comics and movies and the video games. I think story is what really grabs us. and then the story was kind of connected to character, and then I think from there you can kind of make it into the movies or video games. I think it's a great kind of pipeline. So you can test drive a lot of story ideas, and then kind of cherry pick the best ones out of 10 years of comics, of 10 years of Batman comics, and just make a movie or a video game out from its greatest hits. So comics are also a very cheap way to kind of get ideas out there. And one thing that I'm doing with my Kickstarter is that I want to take a big swing with a new idea, a new novel idea. But I think that happens a lot in comics because it's cheap to fail. That might be good for a big multi-million-dollar corporation, but I'm not. So I'm taking a big swing, but also I can't fail. So the only way that I can really ensure that is to learn my storytelling chops, and because knowing story is sort of like a force multiplier. So that way you're just not stabbing in the dark, and then you let the movies just pick the best, story arc out of 10 years worth of work. You can get that, the best part of a story in 3 issues. Like this Kickstarter I'm doing is 3 issues of a story, but it really feels like 6 issues because it's extremely condensed. You read the first issue. A lot happened in that first issue. Like you introduced to a lot of characters, a lot of concepts, and I think ultimately it was still very readable, where it wasn't very confusing. And that was just in a span of 24 pages or so. So with that, it's just basically
I want to table this for one second, because I want to touch upon another concept, and then I promise we're gonna come back to this because I think this is actually really interesting. But the other thing I wanted to ask is that obviously you're doing story, and I promise it relates.
Okay.
You're doing a lot of story work, and you're coming out swinging, and this is sort of one of your first stories outside of a main publisher. But you're an artist, and I mean, I think that gives you an advantage because most people I speak to are either artists or writers, and they're not both. When I think an artist is a writer or has done some writing, or an artist transitions to becoming a writer, they realize, oh my God, if I put 50 trees in this panel, I'm going to destroy my artist, and my artist is not going to be happy. Or conversely, they might understand angles. And so you might understand saying, cool, if I write a scene or a page or two like this, I can visualize how it's going to look and how it's going to appear, because comics is one of the only genres where I have a lot of control as the reader in what happens. In a book, I don't have much control, where a book can take place in 24 hours or it could take place over 6 years, or it could take place over a semester. In a comic, I have a lot of control how fast a character speaks, how slow they speak. Obviously, if you have a 6-night comic book, it's going to take place in 6 nights, or it's a weekend book, it's taking place over the weekend, but the conversation could last 20 seconds or could last 20 minutes. And I have a lot of control. And so what is that like? Because when we talk about storytelling, you can actually visualize and understand, saying this is how this is going to look, so that when it does get put onto paper, you're like, oh, I understand. And you could actually give direction or do it yourself. And what is that like? 'Cause that's a different level of storytelling too, is when an artist is writing a book, they write a book very differently than a writer would write a book who hasn't drawn a book. If that makes any sense. I don't know if that it's a weird concept.
Yeah, if for sure it is. I mean, the biggest difference is some parts of the story are best told visually, and some parts are told with dialogue or narration, and then some parts are you use both. So I can kind of intrinsically understand, like for this scene, whether there needs to be any words, or whether it's like the writer has to second guess what I can do with art, and then the artist has to second guess what a writer can do with just dialogue. So if you do both, you can do a very condensed story. And I take it from the standpoint that people don't like reading, and then oftentimes they don't read past the first issue. So that first issue is extremely condensed. It really is like really 2 or 3 issues compressed down into one. Like there's no empty dialogue that doesn't have any necessarily any meaning. Everything, all the scenes, like some of those scenes are only 2 pages long, and they go by very quickly. Like I'll get into scenes very late and leave very early so that you get just the important stuff. Just because I assume that I have to get people on board very quickly. And if they have to read a lot and then not get the point, I think I've lost them. So at least the first issue moves very fast, you know.
Let's actually talk about that, because obviously, and I don't know this, so I'm going to shoot a little bit blind with this question, but is this the first time this stuff is being published, or was issue 1 released before and then just independently, and then issue 2 is released independently? Because I think this is the first 3 issues are being released all at once, at least on the Kickstarter. So I don't know how this was released. And the reason why I asked that is because if this is the first time all this is being released, it's a very different release than if it was previously being released limited, and now it's sort of a reboot catching everybody up.
This is the very first printing of it, and it's kind of strange that there's 3 issues together. But I don't really when I'm writing, I just kind of write, and then when there's a cliffhanger, it's roughly around like 20-25 pages per issue. I'll get to a cliffhanger, and I just assume this is issue 2. I think what my publisher thought is when he read it, he really liked issue 1, but it really started to take off with issue 2, and then issue 3 really felt like a major cliffhanger. So we decided to put out all 3 issues in one package. I mean, it is a tough sell because a lot of people might think that's a lot of money for 1 issue, but really you're getting 3 issues. I mean, it's really like 80 pages or something like that all together with the 3 issues. And it is the first time it's being released. We just thought that it goes over better. I think people like the first issue enough, but I don't know if you ever read like a comic, like when issue 1 comes out, people are wondering like, well, how did you like it? And always the reviews like, I don't know. It really depends on what issue 2 and 3 are like, because there's not enough here, but we'll see. And that's always the review. So with this one, we release all 3 issues. So by the time you get to the 3rd issue, you'll be able to say whether you liked it or not.
So let's actually talk about that too, because you say it's a tough sell, but also, I mean, there's a lot of stuff right now. At least this is how I feel, and everybody feels a little bit different. But with Kickstarter, and I know this is your first one, I don't know how much time you spent around Kickstarter yet, but one of the problems is that when you're putting out a book, maybe somebody could put out 1 or 2 issues a year. And if you have a 4-part series or a 6-part series and you're doing it, that means that your series is going to take 3 years for me to complete. And at $20 a pop, it gets expensive. And also, it's like, I got 6 months between each issue. Like, how can I build up momentum?
Yeah.
And also, what happens if I don't like issue 1, or that I'm hemming and hawing on issue 1, and then 3-4 months later, I pick up issue 2? I still have to wait, because it's not that issue 1 is even done yet. You still got to print it, then you got to get it to me. It's like we're talking 8 months between issues, technically, sometimes.
Yeah.
And then I can figure out, well, I don't like the book, but now I just spent $40. And so this is one of the problems, is that's why I actually think it's really interesting, because technically speaking, you could end issue 1 on a bad note, but if all 3 issues are coming out at once, it doesn't really matter, because you can end in a weird place or a bad place, or not the greatest cliffhanger on issue 1, but then issue 2 is right there, so it's immediately picked up. It's kind of like, I know people do double features sometimes.
Yeah.
They'll do issue 4 and then 5, and great. So issue 4 has a bad cliffhanger that nobody likes, but issue 5 is already done and it's right next to it. So nobody's ever complaining. So what is that? Because I think it's actually really interesting, because you're giving me a lot of content all at once.
Yeah. I think that's one of the things that kind of turned me off, is like the whole issue 1 where you're waiting for so long for this project that's been hyped up, and then after you read it, people want to know, well, how was it? And I was like, I don't know. We're just kind of getting introduced to everyone, so I won't really know until issue 2 or 3. So this kind of answers that. And I think when I was finished with issue 2, I think my publisher and all the beta readers that we had, they liked issue 1, but then they really liked issue 2. So I just felt like, well, let's put those 2 together so that we just come out with a strong offering. And then I just continued to work, and I finished issue 3, and that seemed like a very good cliffhanger. When you get to that, basically the first arc is done, and then we launch into one big event afterwards, which is issue 4 through 6. So that seemed to be a logical place to end it. So it's like when you watch Lord of the Rings, you get like, one movie and then another movie comes a year later. So it just seemed like a good chunk of story, and it leaves off in a nice place, and it gives you the best of the 3 issues. So
do you also feel that, because this is my feel at this point, is that I obviously buy a lot of comics. I mean, it's no secret that in the last year I spent anywhere from $35,000 to $45,000 on comics. So
wow, okay.
yeah, I run a business, everybody.
Okay.
So I mean, I bought $35,000 to $45,000 worth of comics. I didn't spend that much money, but I spent up there, high enough that people say, "What the fuck's wrong with you?" It's I'm doing all right, everybody. Believe in that. But anyway, right now I have the ability to buy a lot of really good product from independent comic stores, store variants, other comic companies, Indiegogo, Kickstarter, Craftfinder, Zoop, private sales, you name it. I have the option to buy some of the best product that's ever been put out in comics every single week. And so at this point, as a person who buys a bunch of Kickstarters, I need value. Value could be a lot of different things. It could be good covers. It could be page counts. It could be page, cost per page. It could be, are you, $50, $35, $10, $12 an issue? Where are you at in that process? And I think it's a very, very interesting circumstance right now. And do you feel that, to some degree, since you're giving a bunch of content, that provides an element of value? Because I think that's one of the biggest problems right now is I need value provided to me because I have more options. 5 years ago, in my opinion, on Kickstarter and even in comics, value was not the same. Now I have so many more choices, and I literally have the ability to pick up 50 to 70 comic choices every single week that are great for a variety of reasons, whether that's story, price, cover art, who's on the book, the potential of the book, just the concept of the book. Something it sounds so ridiculous you got to buy it, or a graphic novel, something that I bought in floppies is now out that I want in my bookshelf. I mean, it's the gambit for me. So what is that like for you? Because I do think this is some value when you're giving me 80, 90 pages
Yeah.
of content once.
I do feel like we have to come out with a very strong package. I mean, everyone does. And I think our way of competing, because it's basically a signal to noise problem out there. There's just a lot of product. And I think Mark Millar was saying that that's one of the problems with the industry is that there's too much product out there. Just within Marvel and DC, they're putting out too many books. And because of that, their efforts are kind of watered down and spread out over too much. So, he recommends that they kind of trim their line down to like maybe 20 books for each company. And then all that stuff that's really not performing well, the art that's not that great, and those writers that are not that great, just kind of get rid of them all. I think that's very drastic. It probably is what's needed. But I do think we need to raise the level of art and writing in comics. And then in order to get those to represent comics, those great stories and great art to represent comics, that means all the other stuff has to kind of be cleared away, because that just is causing a lot of confusion to people coming in. Like they think there's not much good stuff out there because there's so much bad stuff. And that sounds very gatekeepery.
I'm going to say something mean, and it's controversial, and I'll take the heat for it. There's a lot. So there's a quality problem in comics right now. Oh, without a doubt. I put something up today saying people are starved for quality content. And a bunch of people are like, this is true. And like a bunch of people, and you're talking, I said, look, even me, I mean, if I do 150, 200 interviews a year, there's no way every single interview is going to be the best interview I've ever done. But also, I know a lot of people in the indie realm who are doing 20 books a year. And I'm kind of like, 10 of your books kind of suck. And they're writers. And it's that your concept isn't good. The thought process wasn't good. The execution wasn't good. It's not that you're bad, but it's that the quality is been deteriorated. And I mean, Eric Larson was commenting on it. I like Eric Larson, He said, "Oh, nobody goes out and tries to do a shitty book." But I agree completely with Eric Larson. But that doesn't mean it wasn't achieved to be a bad book or a shitty book. But there's a real problem where I think people have forgotten how to do comics and how to do art and how to do things. And I also think that everybody's just trying to monetize as much as they can get. And I think that there's this issue here where we're in a very weird era with this stuff, and it's very confusing to me.
Yeah, for sure. I think if I do a book, I think people know what to expect of me from the art standpoint, only because my art's been out there a lot. And I think if people see my stuff, they're like, oh, I think I know what that stuff looks like. But even that is probably not that accurate, because I'm actually drawing better than I have before, because this is my baby. I'm going to do my best work on it. All of that stuff I did in the past was done under heavy deadlines. This one, I felt like the pressure was a little bit off. I mean, I could spend 3 days on a page, just because I can set the pace of it. We'll bring it to market when I'm ready. And then, so what's the big question there? I mean, you can kind of plainly see the artwork and decide whether it's for you or not. The question is, like, if a person like me is not a writer, because I had no writing credits in the past, there's no guarantee that I'd be any good at it. So all I can say to that is that I've always had an interest in writing, and I'm one of those guys that consumes a lot of writing, master classes, books, and just material, just recreationally, because I'm a bit of a process junkie, and I love that stuff. So I took the original Robert McKee writing class 25 years ago. Not really planning it, not so much to become a writer one day, but just because I just loved how great writing works. And when I watch a great movie, like, great writing really just, will bring me to my knees. I just love it that much. So all the time I'm spending drawing, the stuff I'm usually listening to on YouTube is basically screen movie criticism and not book writing, just tutorials and stuff, and master classes. So this book is actually written with the same stakes as a screenplay. And I mean, there's a saying out there that 98% of all screenplays get rejected. So that means like a very small amount actually make it through. So those classes that teach you screenplay writing are geared toward to get you to that 2%, which is extremely difficult to achieve. But I'll just, learn that stuff and learn all I can learn about story.
Do you feel, because so obviously outside of this, obviously I run a business, and I've learned how to run my business the hard way. 10 years in, I am just figuring out how to run it really, really well.
Yeah.
A lot of mistakes, a lot of successes, a lot of videos. I'm a student of the game, and I'm a very good investor. And I spend a lot of time watching financial advice and watching a lot of different components. And I agree with people like Dave Ramsey, but I disagree with Dave Ramsey on a lot of things too. But I spend, probably in a given week, I probably spend about 8 to 10 hours on financial analysis and other things, and just people breaking down how they evaluate things. And I spend a lot of time, and I read a lot of books on investing. But I think that is an issue where I think people think they're spending a lot of time on this. But if you're a writer, I mean, you gotta be honing your skills. But I also think that if you're a writer, you should be honing your art skills too. I mean, to some degree, where I don't think you can be a writer. And I'm not saying go draw your book, everybody, if you're a writer, but you should be looking at art analysis.
Yeah.
Because I think that's the other thing, especially, I mean, if you're writing a screenplay, you should know how a camera works. You should know how a director is going to look at your screenplay and shoot it. But if you're doing a comic and you're a comic writer, I mean, you should know how an artist is going to draw it. I'm not saying go draw your book again, but you should maybe say, cool, how would I even do this panel with stick figures? I mean,
yeah, absolutely.
It sounds weird, but I think that's part of the problem, is that I think people are not putting themselves in those circumstances and those shoes. And I think if they did, it'd be better.
Yeah, there's a big, I guess maybe it's a trend at Marvel where they're kind of very intrigued by writers who are really successful, like YA authors, or maybe a successful screenplay writers, and bringing them into comics. And And there's a lot of TV show writers that make it into comics, and they don't necessarily think visually in terms of like the way comics are put together. You end up getting a lot of panels where a lot of pages where they're in the same room for the entire story. That's important for TV shows. Like in order, like you have to set everything like in the library at the school because you can't just keep building all these sets. But that doesn't apply to comics. So we see that a lot, and then it's kind of left up to the artist, especially if you're a veteran artist, that they'll pair you up with a new comic book writer that's coming from film or television, just so that you can make sense of all this mess that they've made. And they also think, like, obviously the big cliche is that they'll think that the characters move inside the panel, which they don't. It's a static medium. It's like, so yeah, they often call for things that can't be handled in one panel or one page, and also they just don't think visually and just don't know all the tropes that like David Mazzucchelli or Frank Miller would know. That the comics has its own visual medium, and the more you know about how to tell a story within it, the better your product is. So yeah, I I think it is good just to I like doing both sides of it, the writing and the art, because I think they are kind of one and the same. And it's a European and Japanese model where a lot of the people who draw are the ones who write as well. And for me, I learned writing. I would consume more comic book writing material if there was any out there. There's just not that much compared to how much there is about screenplays and book writing. So I consume most of that. And with those two fields, the stakes are very high because you have to bring your A game. Otherwise, your multi-million-dollar movie won't get greenlit. I think the thing about comics is that you can afford to write, not that great because the stakes aren't that high, and it's episodic. It comes out every month, and it's a kind of a disposable medium. So you don't really spend that much time writing a story. Like maybe sometimes a writer can write a story in like a week or two, or maybe like a few days. But someone writing a screenplay can spend like 3 years on it or something. So you get better stories. And, I wrote this story. It took me like maybe 2 years just to come up with maybe 3 or 4 issues worth of stuff. So it's just more carefully considered than your average comic book. So I just hope people give it a chance because.
Do you feel though that at this point though that obviously if on Kickstarter, I mean, I would hope I back a bunch of Kickstarters. I would hope somebody's like, I just wrote this in 6 hours, and I didn't really carefully consider it, but don't tell anybody. Like that would be a little like disheartening. Like I would hope somebody, if they're writing a book and then they fund it on Kickstarter, like I spent like 2 weeks on it. Like it'd be very upsetting for me if they're like, I did this story in like a day, and then you wrote like a 20-page script, and like,
well, the definition of story is so broad that it can encompass so many different things, and I think we would all benefit if people just spent a little bit more time learning about writing and also spending more time on their writing, because so much of writing is redrafting, like going back, like when you get to like the 3/4 of the way through, you change your beginning so that it becomes a tighter story, and that's how you deal with things like theme and character. You have to seed things very early on, so you keep on going back and changing stuff and redrafting it. And I think we don't do that in comics because you get paid by the page, so don't go redo a page you already did. So that kind of mentality, you don't get paid that much either for writing a comic. So it just doesn't really bode well for putting out great writing material. So for me, the financial pressure was off, mostly because I made most of my money in the big bubble of comics a long time ago. So I can afford to make this just like a passion project where I love the medium, I love story. I don't want to quickly dash out a story, and I also don't want to just do like a half-assed job with the art. So I think with this story, you get the peak art that that can come from me. I mean, my skills are only so good, and then you get the peak writing. So it's kind of firing on all cylinders, I believe, anyways. So people can tell me what they think. So
see, this is interesting, and even to talk about Kickstarter, because obviously I think in your position, you could have probably gone direct to market. You could have, pitched it to a bunch of different publishers and potentially have gotten into previews, done it that way, release this episodically. Obviously, they might have wanted 4 or 5 issues done already, or 3 issues, send it out as a 3-issue arc. But I think you touched upon it where obviously you have a lot more freedom, you have a lot more control on Kickstarter or crowdfunding, and in general. And so, what is that like? Because it is a different beast when you go through
Right.
a Kickstarter crowdfunding. It doesn't mean it can't go into a publisher on the secondary market or on a second go or into previews later on. But what is that like to say, hey, we don't, or I don't want to go, or me and Daniel, who's obviously the co-creator here, we don't want to go directly to a publisher, even though I'm sure that if you wanted to, it could have been done.
Those are discussions that are kind of going on now. To be honest, like I spent so many years, like a quarter century, as a penciler, and then I just added inking and writing to that. And I think those skills that I learned allowed me to tell a whole story. The parts of the business that I don't really engage that much in right now is, the time I was working for Marvel and DC and Valiant, I just was the creator, and then the guys in the suits in the other office, they actually put together all the plans to market it and sell it. And that's kind of still the case. I mean, my primary concern is the quality of the story, the quality of the art, and the quality of the writing. And then when it comes to whether we do Kickstarter, whether they're NFTs, or whether they're sold in the direct market, those are discussions that happen with 24/7 Comics, which is the publisher. And then I do chime in, but honestly, I don't know too much about the business side of it.
But even this though, to even touch upon this though, I mean, obviously, I mean, you had to make a choice saying, "Hey, let's kickstart it." And so,
Right.
what was that choice like? Because I think you made that choice.
Yeah.
I think you made that choice as far as this whole project, because that's also a very different position. Because
Right.
even to say, "Hey, look, I'm not necessarily running the Kickstarter." Obviously, I'm concerned about the book, and I'm presuming that there's a management team kind of handling parts of this Kickstarter. But even still, the idea that said, "Hey, let's kickstart this thing and see what happens," because that's a very different choice than saying, let's go direct to market. Because, I mean, this is a crowdfunder. This is not
Right.
a, previews book. So what was that like? Because that's kind of a
Uh,
big deal. And this is like the first time you've done it too, which
right.
is
Yeah.
terrifying, I imagine.
My first Kickstarter. Yeah. What appealed to me about it mostly is that there's a direct relationship between me and the end reader, and there's no one in between that gets in the way. So I take my marching orders from the people that support the project. Also, it creates a relationship. I think because comics from Marvel is like working for a corporation, and then the corporation sells it to a comic book store, and then there's the customer. So it's like a B to B to C type business. Uh, and that was always kind of felt weird to me. So I've always was a guy, like my very first writing, when I discovered Instagram, I put out a comic for free on Instagram just by drawing like maybe 5 pages every week and just putting it up for free, just to see whether my writing was any good or not. And the comments that came in were just immediate. Like when I put it up, within an hour, I can say, oh, people are liking this, they're not liking this part. And I just like that relationship between me and the end reader, with no one in between saying like what I should or shouldn't do. And then creating things and experiences for those readers that are outside of what you can get from the direct market. So um, I would like to have a personal relationship with every single person that reads, and kind of tailor the package to what they like, so they can get things that are more exclusive, that are just not just sprayed out to everyone in the public. But I'm a very creative person. I do lots of things. I do lots of drawings. I make lots of like designer toys, and I can kind of just determine what project I want to do, and then kind of just release it directly to them, without having to deal with any type of interloping company that has a say in that decision. So that's the thing that really appealed to me most, is just like going right to the end consumer or reader with this project.
Did you like the fact that you have freedom? Because I could tell you unequivocally, I can do whatever I want on this show. And people like, it's like I have a sponsor. My sponsor if you're a sponsor, you have to watch my show, and you do not get to tell me what I can and can't do on my show. Obviously I care about when I have sponsors, but my sponsors understand that if I'm going to go interview an adult star, an adult entertainment star, you signed up for this. You signed up because I told you up front what I'm going to do. And if you have a problem with that, well, here's your money back.
Right.
And because I love having that freedom, and it served me well, and will always serve me well as an investor, as somebody who sells books on eBay. It's every time I have freedom, I make more money, I do better, and I have a better time. If I don't want to interview somebody, I won't interview them. I don't have to do anything. And so what is that like for you? Because freedom is a very weird concept where it's so hard to explain, but when you have it, it's so powerful. And it's kind of like saying, I mean, the term "fuck you" money is a good example of this, where if you have enough money that you don't have to go to your job today, and you show up at your job, your day is better from the start that you go, because you don't have to, you want to be there. So
yeah, I mean, there was a time in my life where that structure, I do owe a lot to Marvel and DC and Valiant, because they did provide that structure, and then those deadlines are way more important than you think. So you have to be very self-disciplined when there's no deadlines. So there was a time when that came in handy. I am the artist I am today because those corporations really did put a gun to my head and just said, like, if you don't meet these deadlines, we're all screwed. So, I really hated it, but it does keep you producing like crazy, and you improve really fast. There was a time for that, and then there was a time when I think maybe freedom probably wasn't the best idea for me, because I think when you give some people freedom, they end up being just less productive and put out work that really should have some sort of editorial oversight. And I think one of the main reasons that a lot of independent books fail is because of lack of editorial oversight. Sometimes you just need someone smarter than you saying, like, you really shouldn't be doing this way. It'll be better for your success if you kind of listen to me. And there was a time in my life where that was important. So now, I do have that FU money, and then I can kind of put out the product, but I think I am mature enough to know about productivity, and also just to, try to have a lot of respect for the customer in general, so as not to be so divisive or just, put out stuff that's offensive.
Let's talk about that too, because technically speaking, on eBay, my clients are my boss, because they buy my book or the books that I'm selling, and they ultimately line my pockets. So I treat my clients with the utmost respect, but they also don't tell me what merchandise to pick up or take a spec on. Once they buy it, obviously I pack it up appropriately. If they ask for special requests, say, hey, could you double bubble wrap it? Could you double bag and board it? More than happy to do that. But I also understand who's lining my wallet, in a lot of ways. But I also understand that if I know there's a better way how to pack that book up than they're telling me, and that I'm protecting it better, I'm going to do that as well. Because if I know that their book's going to arrive immaculate and they're asking for requests, but I can do it better, I'm going to do it better. So if I can put it in a top loader, and like, can you double bag and board it? I'm like, no, I'm going to put it in a top loader.
Yeah.
Much safer, guys. But it's like, oh, I get your point. But anyway, what you're saying though is that, I mean, right now, I think at Marvel and DC, I mean, ultimately the customer is the boss in a lot of ways. And then more importantly, even on Kickstarter, and I back a lot of Kickstarters, I'm the boss technically, because I am the customer. And if I am unhappy with your issue 1, you can lose me. There have been plenty of Kickstarters that have lost me because they have screwed around with getting it to me. They got me the wrong cover. They say, oh, we had an issue with the foils. Here's just cover A. And I'm like, but I just spent $35 for a foil. And you give me a cover A, like, where are we sitting here? And you lost me as a client indefinitely. And so I think it's really, really, I'm a capitalistic guy, and I think it's great. Like, I'll be honest, if your book sucks and I buy it, I'm not coming back for issue 4.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. I think that's great. Yeah, I think that direct relationship with the end user. I think, with Marvel, I didn't know who was my boss. I mean, I primarily deal with the assistant editor, but then there's the top editor who I never really speak to, and then there's Marvel in general, and then there's the people who are in the comic books, own the comic book stores, and then there's the final customer. So it's hard to even know which person you're trying to please, and hopefully they all kind of want the same thing. But with this, I do know that we plan to put out our 24/7 Comics is my publisher plans to put out a lot of books. So this is the kind of the experiment of many Kickstarters, and we do know that you're only as good as your last Kickstarter, because you really do have to deliver. You have to be very careful about that, or at least provide really good updates and communication as to why there's been some sort of hiccup. And yeah, it just really bothers me for those people who don't deliver, or just taking forever with no updates. That is, I'm sure, has hurt me tremendously, because there's a lot of
let's talk about this. So obviously, I don't know how many Kickstarters have you backed? Just curiosity.
About 4. Yeah, I mean, I kind
You're
of
new. You're new. You
I'm very new.
don't get an argument in this one. You don't get an argument. You don't get to sit at the table yet.
Yeah.
So I've backed, I think, almost 90.
Wow.
Right. So that's not a lot. I know people who back like 1,000. So
that's great. Fantastic. Yeah.
Good for them, right? So 90 is a lot for me. I'm more than happy to back. But I'm very selective on what I back, because I back what I want to buy. Doesn't mean I don't love comics, but if I backed everybody who I interviewed, I'd be broke and I'd be in debt, and I'd be like living in a cardboard box with my comics getting soaking wet when it rains. It'd be a sad sight to see, everybody, and we don't want that. But anyway, so I have been burned on a bunch of campaigns. I've had goalposts moved. I've had projects be delayed by 2, 3, 5 years.
Wow.
And after a while, and when that happens, now we're talking $30. What happens when you get burned for $1,200? All of a sudden you say, you know what? I'm hurt. I've been burned. I'm going to sit a few out. So the first time I got burned, I sat out 1.5 years.
Wow.
Who did that hurt? In reality, that hurt only those people who had projects on there. And then it took me 1.5 years to come back to Kickstarter. But I was really, really, really hurt by this project where no communication, didn't understand. It was supposed to be a birthday gift. And I'm like, where the hell is this book? And then when I got the book, there was no stretch goals promised. There was no other things promised. There was no backup story. Everything that was supposed to be achieved wasn't there. And I even said, dude, like, where's this stuff? And guys like, oh, I had a bunch of cancellations. I'm like, but you promised all of this stuff.
Yeah.
Like, I didn't understand. And then I sat out for 1.5 years because I was so devastated and hurt. And I was like, so again, and then even when I get burned now, I tend to pull back a little bit. And this is why I've only backed 90. And that hurts people like you. It hurts a bunch of my friends. And they don't have a solution, and they can't fault me, though. And let's say that it's your first Kickstarter that you've backed and you've been burned.
Yeah.
Statistically, I don't know what's going to make you come back. If my first Kickstarter, I get burned. It took me 1.5 years. And that's an issue. And so this is my big, and when somebody's late by 6 months, I mean, I think you're late. So if you say, hey, I'm going to be 5 months out, and it's 5 months and 1 day, you're late. I'm sorry. You're late. I understand things happen. I'm not saying you should be ostracized and the money should be given back, but you're late. So that's just how I feel. But and then there's been plenty of people who I won't back because they've been late. And I'm like, I can't trust you.
Yeah.
And so trust is a big issue on Kickstarter for me right now.
Yeah, I can imagine.
There are people who are banned on this show who are late on their projects. So quickest way I had to get banned on my show is launch 5 projects and don't deliver on any of them.
Okay.
And then, and let's say I didn't even back any of it. I look at track records on this show. And I look at people who delivered, how they interact with their clients, and how they deal with people, because I think it's a big deal. If you're an asshole to the people who are backing you and supporting you when they ask questions to you publicly and privately, and they just spend $100 on your campaign over 2 or 3 of them, and you're an asshole to them, I mean, that's a good way how not to get my attention. That's a good way how not get my money too.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it's very similar to like we deal with as an artist commissions all the time, and there are people who sometimes take a year to deliver in the commissions. Like when I take a commission, it's hard to sleep at night. It's kind of like that list is there. Like there's 3 more on that list, and there's promised by this date, and it's just such a relief to get it out the door. And I just don't know like how some people are just so comfortable having people like waiting for so long, and you ghost them to just avoid talking about it. Like that's just no way to live your life. I would just feel so bad. So I want a clear conscience. I'd rather not take a commission just because it just frees me of having to have like an assignment that I got hit a date on. So I don't end up taking too many commissions. But when I do, like I would contact the person like every few days. I can tell them like it's coming, but this is what's on my table now, and I kind of give them a lot of updates. And then also, if there is a situation ever where they have to wait longer than expected, then I would do more on the drawing. And they're always like, "Wow, I didn't know it was going to be this much. Like you put in backgrounds." And I was like, "Yeah, that's because you waited like 1 extra week." So I've actually gotten commissions from them before. It's like, please go late on this because I want that background again. So I'm the kind of person that just to keep a customer waiting, it just really feels bad to me.
I deal with this all the time where I sell previews. So I have books that are sometimes 20 weeks out. And I let my clients know. And sometimes clients are difficult and they're like, well, I want my money back. I'm like, fine.
Yeah.
Fine. You can have it back. No worries. And I have policies now that provide protections for me. But also when clients wait, they get extra books and they get extra cool stuff that I have. Like, oh man, you didn't have to do that. Like, no, man, you were patient. You didn't torture me. So I was like, oh, I get it. And then you know what happens? They buy from me again. And
Right.
I'm like, hey, I got this book in stock. And I go, yeah, I want that one too, man. And then also I have clients who say, hey, look, this book is 10 weeks out. I know you ordered this one. I have it in stock. If you want me to combine the shipping, you're going to have to wait 10 weeks. I'm like, yeah, man, no worries. I know I'm going to get the book. I don't really care.
Right.
And so obviously it's tricky, but I understand client relations. And I think a lot of people do not understand client relations. It is very easy to lose a client, and it is very, very hard to get them back and retain them. But I digress. I do want to talk about rewards a little bit because I know there's the digital copy of 1 to 3. There's the physical copy of 1 to 3. I think there's artist editions of some of these books. I also think you can get everything of Evermind, all like the artist editions 1 through 3. And I have pictures of some of this stuff. So obviously we have a very fun monkey here. Very fun. We have this one right here, which is cool. I think this is, I'm looking for another one here. I think this is another cover.
Yeah.
I think.
The cover, so issue 3, yes. Yeah.
Is this? No, that's one. That's definitely not that's your work. But so yeah, so we have those out there. And then there's some other stuff too where I know you have a CGC option, which is very cool, where I think you're signing and I think Daniel Wu's signing.
Daniel, yeah.
So that's cool in that regard, and that's nice. And I think are they all guaranteed 9.8s?
Yeah, they are. Yes.
So or higher, right? I mean, it could come back higher, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
But you're guaranteed at least a 9.8. Whether it comes back a 9.9 or a 10, could happen. It could happen. You know, stranger things have happened. I think you're going to attempt to get as many high grades as possible. but you're guaranteeing a 9.8, which is a really good grade. And then you also have a few other things as well, where I think you have the art vault and the design vault, which I think is some original drawings from you, some like design drawings from you. And so if somebody wants them from, I guess, your stash, for lack of a better word, that's an option. I think there's also a bunch of books in there too, right?
Yeah. There are packages that have everything. So the original art stuff is basically, I've worked for Marvel and DC for like 30 years. So, they return the artwork to you. So quite often I have a bunch of these, so that gets included into these. It could be pages from Iron Man from my 3-year run, or it could be Wolverine or Spider-Man or Batman Beyond. And then the design work, I did work for Marvel's Creative Services division doing style guides. So that's the three view turnaround of how the character looks, so that when someone's making like the underoos or the lunch boxes, they get to see like the standard of how the character looks. And then it also gets handed out to artists because they all have different styles. So this allows them to see what the basic approved design looks like, and then you can put your own style twist on it. So I get all that artwork back, and it just kind of sits in my closet. So now I'm just putting it out as part of this Kickstarter.
So obviously this is a really cool time to get original art, and obviously it's going to be pretty cool, And is it mostly like pages?
They're mostly, they're not, I don't think there's any covers involved in there. Those get sold pretty early on. So these are interior pages of all different types, all different levels. Yeah.
But it's Marvel and mostly DC stuff, right?
Yeah.
So obviously, if you're looking for the Marvel DC stuff, it's in there, and I'm also presuming that if somebody can double up, they're not going to get the same 2 packages beyond. I mean, for the art side of things, right?
Probably, yeah. That we'll have that discussion when it's like close to fulfillment, like how exactly we divide everything up. Yeah.
So I mean, there's no double pages of your artwork, like original artwork. I'm presuming, right?
You're talking about double page,
there's no duplicate. So there's no you don't have 2 Batman page 6s that you draw.
Oh no, they're all one of a kind. Yeah, original, whatever was like, every single one of those pages are printed somewhere in a comic. So yeah.
No, I'm purposely clarifying for a reason. I'm purposely clarifying for a reason because it is important that sometimes people don't understand what original art is.
Right. Yeah, it's one of a kind, and it's been in print at Marvel or DC. Yeah.
So there you go. And then obviously, I mean, there's just a bunch of other stuff. Obviously, there's a package for everything. I think there's you get all 3 books CGC'd as well, signed and all that stuff. So obviously, there's something for everybody on this campaign. And you can go very basic. And also, I think the 3 books are like 35, right? If I'm not
mistaken. You get the 3 books, and it comes with a PDF. So if you don't want to crack them open, you can put it on your shelf. But then you can read the all the issues on your computer. So yeah.
And the reason why I bring that up is that 35 for 3 books is not that bad once you realize it's 3 books. And that's something that I think needs to be definitely clarified in that regard. But I do want to back outside of your campaign. I do want to talk about some cover work that you've done.
Okay.
And I'm a Zenescope guy. So I love Zenescope. Obviously, Ralph is coming on, I think, on the 7th. I've had Joe on. I've had Dave Franchini on. I've had Pat Chen on. I've had Raven on. I'm still locking down Dave Wall. So that'll be fun. I've had Sun Kumanaki. I've had Ebas. I've had a lot of people. I've had Keith Garvey on. All these top people have been on my show. So it's fantastic, and I'm always adding new. But I do want to talk about this cover because this is a trippy cover. Obviously, Alice is playing with puzzles. Might be a good way to put it. It's a cool piece because it's trippy. I think it's theater 7 or theater 5 or theater. I don't know what the book is, but it's number 5 in the series. And it's definitely a trippy book. So what's the story behind it?
Well, I kind of like doing covers for these guys because a lot of times when they say they want a cover, they'll send you like the entire script because usually the artwork's not done yet. You have to read the writer's script and then submit like a bunch of ideas, like maybe 3 different ideas, and they pick one. that process is not fun. You feel like you're not getting paid for that part. The great thing about Zenescope is they're like, well, they think very visually, and they have like they have a very impactful type of image in their head. So they just described it to me. They just said like, well, she's basically uh, like on a puzzle, and then parts of her body are coming apart like a puzzle. So I just drew it, and they just accepted it, and that way, like, I don't have to come up with all these different variations. So in every one of their covers, they have a high concept already figured out, and then I would just do like very minimal layout work, and then it's just off to the races. So fortunately, they're very good at that, because a lot of times companies will come up to me with a cover, and I'm like, that's not going to make a good cover, but they insist that they want it, and then you just end up having to draw it, and it's not the greatest thing, but they have a winning concept every time, and I think it's like Dave Franchini or mostly him.
Dave Franchini's done
Yeah.
it. Ralph's done it. I don't know if Joe's ever done it. Booking covers, but I know Ralph has booked a lot of covers. I know
Yeah.
Dave Franchini's booked a lot of covers. And a few other people have obviously done a lot of work with that and help with that. But even to talk about this too, because the thing about Zenescope covers is that a lot of them, because they do a lot of exclusives, they do a lot of showcases, and a lot of the time these books are coveted. They're kept in a lot of private collections, and they're spoken about forever. And obviously, this is one of the things where Zenescope has such a huge loyal fan base that they covet and protect and hunt down covers. And what is that like? Because this one in particular is one of those that is well known and people know it and people covet it, and it's a rare book to find and it's hard to track down. So what is that like for you? No, because I'm going to say some of the nicest way I could say about Marvel, that sometimes a Marvel cover stays around forever, but there's also a bunch that kind of just fall into the gear chain, for lack of a better word. But a book like that doesn't fall into the gear chain.
Well, this is all kind of new to me. I did the cover a long time ago, and these are assignments that come up, and I do my best on it, and I deliver it. And then usually the editor will say like, well, this is great, thanks. And then that's as far as I go. Like a lot of times I never see it finished or colored. You really have to kind of seek it out. And then sometimes, like, I guess the first time I would see it when someone would bring it to me at a convention to sign. I was like, oh, well, I did this 3 years ago, so that's how that looks. It's all colored up and everything. And a lot of times I don't even know what the is, because sometimes they don't tell. And then the idea that it's a collectible, or that there's a community that values it, that's kind of new to me too, because I really don't hear those discussions. I really should keep more of a tab on what's going on. But you'd be surprised, like, as an artist, you do the cover, you put it out there, you don't really get to see or what's happening with it. So like when you brought up that cover, I had no idea that it was sought after at all, just because it might be, but I just never hear about it. So it's kind of news to me. So, but I'm thrilled though, because
So what is that like for you? Because obviously, I mean, you touch a lot of different realms. So obviously, I mean, you've been in comics for 30 years. I'm 30, so obviously I used to get a bunch of books CGC'd. I'm more interested in selling raw books. It's just less work. It's easier money because I don't have to wait 6 weeks for 8 weeks or 10 weeks for a book to come back CGC'd. It just solves a problem. Also, the book, I don't have to put $20 into the book. I can sell for 60. It just is an easier process. And also, if it comes back at like an 8.5, I'm kind of fucked. So, not that it will, but a book I think can come back as a 9.4 when I think it's a 9.8. But if I sell it raw, it's anybody's game.
Right.
So the point though is that, what is this like for you? Because 20 years ago, this wasn't a thing. People collected comics. People treasured their comics. That's been around forever. But what is this like now that people are getting things graded, signed, and they're viewing it as a commodity? Because it's definitely a different entity now. And look, I'm guilty of causing part of the problem. I mean, I have no problem. This is a business for me, and it's a lucrative one. But it is very much a commodity. It is a collectible. It is an asset class. and people desire this. And as somebody who's produced covers that are desired and treated that way, I mean, it's what is that like for you? Because it must be so weird, but it also must be so flattering.
Yeah.
Like,
Oh, yeah. It's extremely flattering. I honestly, I don't really understand it. Like as a creator, I'm not really a collector at all. So I don't really collect anything. So the behavior of collectors is kind of baffles me. And in the beginning, if I didn't think about it too much, I used to have a love-hate relationship with creators because I mean with collectors because the fact that they collect my stuff, that means a lot to me. But what they're collecting is all the stuff that has that Marvel stamp of approval. And I haven't worked for Marvel for a long time. And the stuff that when I was, an A-list artist at Marvel, that was like during my Iron Man days. That was so long ago. So if they're still talking about that, I would like them to take a look at Evermind because that's the best art that I've done personally. But it doesn't have that Marvel stamp of approval, so to them it's worth nothing. So that kind of was the love hate thing. But now there's no hate. There's like love and kind of do not understand that much. But the most important thing to me is if someone wanted to read Evermind or any of the comics that I've done in the past, you can do that for free because you can find it online and read it. And I appreciate the fact that they're reading it because I drew it so that people can read it. But I don't make any money from it at all when they pirate it. But there is a group of people there will pay like $50 for a comic, which is crazy. But that does help me because I mean that really that the whole industry around those people who are willing to pay more for it because it's collectible, it really is what keeps everything afloat. So I have to respect that.
it's interesting where somebody has a bunch of people have a problem with what I do, which is buy spec on a book, flip a book. And then I was speaking to a guy named Dustin Burnell, who's Ethereal Comics press. And one of the things that he says, I love flippers. I love when somebody buys my book and sells it for $35. Because guess what? It makes my book more valuable. And then now they have it and they're going to say, cool, where could I get the next issue of this? Maybe I should just buy it from Dustin when it comes up and before it sells out on his campaign. And so that's something that I think is very interesting, where I think a lot of people don't understand sometimes that, you have to, I mean, I am a beneficial to the industry to some degree because if I buy one of your books and then I buy for 10, then I sell for 40, isn't it good that your book's trading for $40 on eBay? I mean, to some degree, because it wouldn't be trading for that if it wasn't good and the art wasn't good inside of it, right? And then doesn't that create value for you so that the next time you release something like that, somebody's like, oh, cool, Chen just did this thing. It's super limited. There's 100 copies. Maybe I should pick it up because it might be valuable.
Yeah, I mean, all that's very good, and it really is the lifeblood of our industry. I mean, there's the big one response to piracy because like porn and anime can be pirated, but you can't pirate things as a collector because that really does have to have a quality physical thing that you're collecting. So I think it's good in many ways, and I just love seeing when someone is and early on when I was doing Iron Man, I sold a lot of those covers. I held on to them for a while, but only for like a few years. But then eventually sold them because I thought I did my due diligence by holding on to it and just not selling to the first person who asked. But I had no idea that they would go on to be worth so much. So if I held on to them till now, then that's where the real money is. But the thing is, it does please me to see someone selling that cover for like whatever they 12,000 or something or 25,000. That feels great because something I did sold for that much. Whether that money comes to me or not, it's not such a huge thing because I'm more concerned with the intrinsic value of something rather than me being able to turn that into lining my pockets. So it's all good. I never feel bad. I think the whole idea with NFTs or something that there's supposed to be some way for every time it gets sold that some of the money gets kicked back to the original creator. Like, I think that sounds great, but I just don't know how it's going to happen. But in theory, it sounds kind of cool. But
Oh,
yeah,
I could
yeah.
explain it. I understand this. I got burned out on an NFT project because my wallet got hacked. But I'm a big crypto guy. I'm
Okay.
I'm a big crypto guy. I like my Ethereum. I like my Bitcoin. I like other cryptocurrencies that are great. The theory is that it's written in more or less the code of the NFT, so that you set up a percentage that's kicked back to you, and it's extremely beneficial. Where I am more than happy. And statistically, if you have an NFT that's a very tradable NFT, you might actually make more money by gifting the NFT to somebody
I
if
see.
you get a royalty kicked back to you, which is ludicrous. Because I actually looked at doing it with a bunch of these episodes, and I would just give them and openly trade them as long as I get my 4% royalty kicked back to me on every single trade. Because what do I care
Right.
if and it'd be great if the NFT was like cost like point like 5 Ethereum or point like 0.05 Ethereum, which is like $20. It's more than $20, but the point is that if it was $20 to listen to an exclusive interview and it's trading, then every time it did that, I got $1. That'd be fantastic. I'd be so wealthy. Oh, it'd be so good. But I love the concept of it, but it's also complicated because it
Yeah.
has to be desired. And also, what happens if somebody just holds on to their NFT forever?
Yeah.
Because look, there are application uses of NFTs, but this is a different discussion. I know way too
Yeah.
much about this, way
That's
too much.
cool.
I like the space. That's why. But yeah, so I mean, I would love an NFT of this. I mean, that'd be dope. That'd be dope. Especially if it had application uses, because that's the key. Everything in life is application, and but just wait. Think of an NFT as a gym membership card that you could then sell,
I
but the
see.
gym gets 10% when you sell it. So you buy it for $200. Now it's an exclusive gym, meaning they only issue out 200. So to say you don't want to go to the gym anymore, you sell your NFT, which is your gym membership, for $400. And the point is that the gym is massively exclusive to that. And that's a concept of the NFT. So the gym
Mhm.
makes money by initially selling you the NFT, and then when you get sick and tired of it, you sell it back to somebody else for more money. They get
Yeah.
a percentage of it, or you sell it for less money and they get a percentage of it. It's
Right.
brilliant, so brilliant. But anyway, I digress.
Very
Um,
cool. Yeah.
but this that's not the cover either. This trying to find the cover actually. This one is the one I want to talk about because I like Wonderland, and this is pretty much that. So yeah,
Okay.
I
I
like it.
remember doing this one. There was this was a two-part cover. One was supposed to be like they're very like pretty and polished, and then there was a second version where it's all kind of zombified. Like I remember doing that. So I don't I actually haven't seen the other one, but yeah, yeah, these are a lot of fun. Um, I mean, it's what can you complain about? It's drawing pretty girls and stuff. I think they have a winning model, and the community they built is like very rabid, and they're very into the product, and I think they've just done a great job as a company. You know,
No, I love Zenescope. I love Zenescope. I think they're great. I think that they just run into the problem that every company's running into, where there's too much product out
yeah,
there. And when again, I have 70 to 100 options every single week, and I have what, maybe $80. I mean, technically, and also gets complicated because as a business, I know that Zenescope might take 3 months to sell, but another company will take 24 hours to sell.
right.
And so now I'm in a rough position because it's like, who do I go with? It's a mess collectively. Um, but I love Zenescope. I love their covers. I love everything they do. I love their stories too. Honestly, I think they do a great job with Van Helsing. I think they do a
Yeah,
great job with Robin Hood, and I think that sometimes Wonderland is good. Sometimes it's not. There have been arcs in the first Wonderland was brilliant. The whole thing was the first one was brilliant, and then some of the spin-off stuff was okay, and some of it was fantastic. But And then also they just do some cool stuff like Mangold and the Bunny Man. Oh my fucking god, that thing was brilliant. Oh my god, that thing was brilliant in so many ways. So I think it's one of their best things they've ever produced. But I digress. Their Katie Forbes cover was that thing was just off the chain. I'm gonna get in so much trouble for that on TikTok. It's gonna be funny though. It's gonna be funny. Otherwise, I can do like 10,000 plays on that thing. It's gonna be great. But I digress. I digress. Again, I'm part of the problem. I understand. But and this is the Iron Man one that we were speaking about, and what's that like? Because it's Iron Man.
Yeah, no, it's just very fortuitous timing. So up until then, I've been working for Valiant. So as soon as I got into Valiant, I had my eye on Marvel, just because I mean it was kind of crappy of me, but I didn't really appreciate the time I was at Valiant. I should have, because it's a very special company. But I was just kind of so upwardly mobile, like trying to get to the top of as close as I can to the top of the comic book industry. And that just means I had to get out of the small pond and get into the bigger pond that was Marvel. So as I was working my way up through Valiant, their flagship character was Exo-Man of War. So I finally worked my way up to Exo-Man of War, and I was like, oh, okay, well, I'm in the biggest fish in this small pond. And just didn't know how to parlay that into getting into Marvel or DC. But as it happened right at that time, Iron Man was licensed to Image for this event called Heroes Reborn. So Image was doing Iron Man. And then when it came back to Marvel, everyone's like wondering, well, who's going to be the artist for all these books? I mean, it was the Avengers, Fantastic Four, and Iron Man, and one other, Captain America. So it's basically who's going to be the artist on the book. Like all eyes were on that. So I had a meeting with Marvel, and I can show them Exo-Man of War, which is really the same character, just in a different color. And so they can really see what it's going to look like, and they can see that I can handle the technology stuff pretty well. So then they chose me on this character that was previously like a B-list or C-list character. But I got onto it. And then, for 3 years, I just drew my ass off and just tried to do the best job I possibly can and try to keep it on time. And then, so that was a great book to be on for me. It just kind of fit all my skill sets. And then ever since then, he's been like the leader of the Avengers movies, and then he's like, everyone knows him now, practically more than any other Avenger, because he was like, and that's all just like very fortuitous. I mean, there was a timing thing, and there was the fate of the character thing that I kind of just rose up with them just organically, because right place at the right time and right character. It was like a B-list character, which allowed me to get on it. But then it became an A-list character over a couple of decades. And then just my association with Iron Man, it kind of brings me up.
Yeah, let's actually talk about that too, because I'll be honest, there have been interviews that have made me and have gotten me into way many more doors than necessary. So, I mean, it just so happens that sometimes you meet the right person at the right time. Sometimes you say the right things. Sometimes somebody just wants to help you. It's weird where people want to help people and people are thrilled to help people. I've been in certain circumstances where getting person A and B and C and D, it opens up a door for me. Or, somebody makes a recommendation and they make a really good one and it's helpful. And then when you're talking to somebody's like, hey, you should have just started with that. You interviewed 3 of my friends. Like, and it's kind of funny in that regard. And so what is that like? That obviously, I mean, I think you would have been fine without Iron Man, but it sure as hell helped. And it probably sped up a lot of stuff. And it probably even today, because if you had a 12-year-old back in the day reading it, that Iron Man, and those 3 years, let's be realistic, a 42-year-old or a 45-year-old has money now.
Yes.
So they can go and pick up certain things or get a commission from you or want certain things that you've worked on. And when you're at a con, they might make it a point to go to your table and pick up a print or pick up something from you that you're working on, because it's you and it's their childhood book.
Yeah.
And so
Absolutely. Yeah.
because the people who that book might have been targeting they didn't have money when they were 22. They started probably getting money when they're 30, and now when you're 40, you're starting to have money and you're starting to obviously develop wealth. Hopefully, not. I don't want to make any assumptions, but a 40-year-old is going to have a lot more money than a 22-year-old,
Yeah, for
by
sure.
definition. Overall, I guess.
Yeah, I do see that a lot. I just got back from New York Comic Con, and whenever I do these interviews or do conventions, it almost always is like, oh, your Iron Man is what really, And I didn't really think that my art compared to what it is now, it's not something I'm necessarily proud of, but it meant so much to them. And like I just did Dave Finch's show, and you have to draw right next to him, and he's such an amazing artist. And he told me during that stream, like, oh, when I was younger, I used to take your Iron Man and then draw from it and try to learn and copy how you do that. And it's a little bit of a shock for two reasons. First of all, like I was impressed that he was learning from something I did, and number two, I thought we were the same age. Apparently, I'm a lot older, but Iron Man seems to be everyone's kind of entry into my work. That seems to be the one thing. Like,
see, I know your work from Zenescope. I'm like the odd one out here, but I'm 30, and I know your work from Zenescope. And I mean, I get this. So for those who don't know, the person who referred me was, I think, Kimberly Ness.
Okay.
So she referred me to you, and then I'm like, is this the Sean Chen from Zenescope? No, it can't be. He can't be that guy. It can't be, because I didn't know your Marvel work. I mean, I know you did some work on Batman Beyond, because I really enjoy Batman Beyond. But like, I'm like, no, it couldn't be. It couldn't be this guy. It's way too of a coincidence. This guy's like a legend. Like, there's no way in hell. And I'm like, is it this guy? And then I'm like, and then I'm going on the kiss. It looks like this guy. It looks like him. But like, I'm the odd one out, because
right.
I mean, obviously, when I do my research, I'm like, oh man, that's the Iron Man, he's done Wolverine, he's done the Marvel stuff. But I know you from Zenescope, and in particular, the theater book number 5 that you did. And so that's how I know you. It's weird. I know you from Batman Beyond. So I'm the odd one out here.
Well, that's great. I think when you're kind of doing a Marvel book, you either do the interiors or the cover, just because of the whole assembly line nature of it. There's plenty of people who want to do covers, so not many people want to spend time doing the interiors. It's very hard to learn to do, and it's a ton of work. So there's a lot of illustrators out there, concept artists, oil painters, who can all do covers, but they can't do the interiors. So it just seemed like a waste for me to do the cover as well, even though I think people like to see the same artist on the exterior as the interior. But there's so many people who can only do covers, and they also paint so well, like they might as well do it. So that leaves me without any cover jobs. And then when Raven Gregory, he saw me and said, oh, I really like your work. And so does Nia Rufino. And they both had invited me to do Zenescope covers. And I'm like, oh, someone wants a cover for me. And it's been like maybe, I don't know how many, like 100 covers later. I've done so many covers for them. And it's been a great steady gig. Like I never knew when it was going to be my last cover, because they're known for a certain type of aesthetic. And like, Ebas is kind of like the very top of that. I'm not really known for doing that type of stuff, but every cover just led to another one. And I took them on because, hey, it's a cover, how often do I get to do one? It wasn't like later I found out when, like, there's a lot of up and coming artists who are trying to get some work. And I said, well, have you ever tried Zenescope? Because you can't get a Marvel cover yet, because I mean, it's Marvel, but like maybe Zenescope. And they're like, oh no, I don't want to do Zenescope, because once you do one of their covers, you can't do a Marvel cover anymore because you're a smut artist or something. And I was like, well, I didn't know that. I'm glad no one told me that, because then I would have turned it down. But I think it's only been great for me. It's been a great outlet. And I think
it's interesting, because I take a very monetary approach to life. And I have this conversation. I mean, I'm not broke. I know so many people in comics who are broke, and they're producing 20 books. And it's great. You got all the glory. I'm so happy for you. But you have no money. And yet here I am. I funded my Roth IRA. I'm running a very successful, profitable business, and then I'm investing in it, and then I make my money, make me more money. And I say, how are you broke? Like, you guys are living the dream. I don't have the dream. I don't have anything, but I have money. How is this working? Like, I would love to do what you do, but I can't do it. But I have money and I'm financially stable, and you're not. But you
Yeah.
are living the dream. Like, and so this is where I'm going with this, though, is that at a certain point, I feel artists have to get realistic, and even writers have to get realistic, saying, if I have a gig waiting for me potentially at Zenescope, and they're going to pay me to do covers, and they're going to hire me 12 to 15 times a year, that's 15 gigs that I now have. Sure, doing a Marvel cover would be great, but do I want to maybe get ahead on my rent? Do I want to actually have a gig? Do I want to get a little bit more exposure? And maybe that you could go to bad, but you go to a bunch of companies that are similar to Zenescope. But I think there's a point where you have to say, great, I understand that this is money and I need to eat. And I would love to do a Marvel cover. And if I do a Zenescope cover, Marvel's not thrilled or DC's not thrilled with me. Okay. But if it comes up in conversation, you guys weren't looking at me and I needed to pay my rent. Like, what did you expect me to do? And that's what I don't understand, is that why is that conversation not occurring? Because at a certain point, I know people who are broke and they're pitching that their car transmission just went out. And I'm like, but Zenescope might have wanted to hire you, and you might have wanted to pay you over 3 or 4 covers, maybe $600-$700, or I don't know, and your car would have been fixed. So, like, there was a gig potentially waiting for you. You turned it down because you wanted the Marvel stuff. Yet they're not calling you. Like, a bird in the hand is worth more than 2 in the bush.
Right. Yeah. I kind of think along those terms as well. I think they're thinking that the bigger fish is Marvel, and if you dabble in this pond here, it kind of taints you as a. I don't really worry too much about it. Like, I think the most important thing for me was that I just desperately needed cover. Not just the visibility of it, but just to get used to drawing them. I mean, the more you do, the better you get. I just didn't have that much experience drawing back full size. So I took it as a very important lesson to learn, just to be able to do other covers and other commissions, just to get a number of, and Zenescope was really good for that. Just the quantity, the sheer number of covers they asked me to do. I learned so much from them. And I'm forever grateful to Raven for bringing me in. Because that just led to a relationship that went on. It really just ended this year. And that's because I've been so busy with this. But I think I probably would have continued doing more and more.
Did it end, or is it on a hiatus?
Well, I hope it's on a hiatus. But,
like I said, we're putting a positive spin.
Right.
You took a leave of absence. See how this looks better on the resume?
I think that there's so many people entering the business who are very good with digital stuff. Like, I'm not sure why they kept calling me back. I don't know whether it was because of the name recognition, but I don't know what I brought to the table. They said they liked the covers, but the cheesecake stuff. Yeah, I was known for drawing Iron Man. It's so far away from cheesecake, so they had to have some sort of vision that I was going to be able to do this well. And so I'm very thankful. And then, like, the fact that you like that cover, I think it means a lot to me. It just means that was something that I can consider a success. So they kept on calling me back, and as a guy who doesn't paint, I would pencil and ink the cover and then give them black and white artwork, and then they'd have to still hire someone to color it and stuff. But they put up with all of that, and it seems like it would have gone on forever. I had to, put a stop to it just because of the workload. But it's been a great relationship. I had no idea it was going to be so many covers, but I'm so thankful, because a big part of the reason I am the artist I am is because they put me on these high profile. High profile means it's really visible outside of just doing interior work. That you have to become an illustrator, not just a comic book artist. And I learned so much from just the sheer quantity that I had to do there. But yeah, it was a lot of fun. So I'd like to go back to it someday.
No. I agree. I mean, a lot of people say, "Hey, great, I'm not going to do your show because you interview adult entertainment stars." And I'm like, okay, but you got to realize that shit gets views and it gets people looking at me, and I'm like, cool.
To their credit, I thought that they were a certain type of company. So when I was doing a cover for them, I would do some samples for them as to like what I thought would make a good cover, and then I made it very very sexy because I thought the sexier the better. They're gonna love it. And then I got a call from maybe like Dave or Randy saying like, this is like going too far. Like I think this is not really what we do. Um, it causes a lot of trouble to go this far with it. So if you can kind of tone it down, do a toned down version. So I thought that was great because they're not just like a penthouse.
Yeah,
yeah
they're not Fargo's Lounge. They're not
yeah
naughty and nice. They're not totally rad. And I like all these companies. There's nothing wrong with these companies.
right
There's plenty of more that I can name. But yeah, they do topless, and that's where they stop.
right. And
That's
also they're a large part of their readership are female. So go figure.
That is true. Yes, I agree. And it's also when they do topless, it is tasteful.
Yeah
Might be the word to use.
yeah
Um, they have a few risky covers that are some of the riskiest stuff they've done, where it's pretty risky for them. But it is rare, and they definitely do it. Most of their covers are tasteful.
yeah
Most, not everything, but I would say 99% of their covers are tasteful. But so I love them. I love them. I think they're a great company. Obviously, Ralph would not come on my show 4 or 5 times if I didn't want to see Ralph. Um, they have a product that I want. I can't wait for it to come out. But they're actually doing something cool that's going to be fun potentially for you, where they're doing a Wonderland trading card set.
Oh, cool.
So I don't know whose art is going to be on that, but it's going to be very exciting because they're going to do a lot of cover art. They're going to do a lot of hero art. They're going to do a lot of cool stuff. So very excited for that. That's actually going to be Kickstarter, so it's going to be fun.
Oh,
But I digress on that. I do want to back out, and I do want to touch upon a few things more with you because I'm curious. And I know we touched upon certain things. I think we kind of talked about the health of the industry and where it's at. It is what it is.
yeah.
Obviously, that there are problems. Let's just leave it at that. But I am curious where you think comics are going, because we're in a weird space right now in this industry where we got mainstream sort of doing okay, but not doing okay, owning a
Yeah.
lot of IPs, almost being an IP farm, but a profitable IP farm. But we also have indies that are killing it, but also we have indies that are failing. And then we have Image, which is a mixture of both. And then who knows what the hell's going on with Image with G.I. Joe and Transformers, right? Like that thing's getting odd too, where and then IDW is a mess. Like, and like what else is out there? Like, and then Boom. I don't even know what's going on with Boom lately, but like there's all this stuff that's happened in the last 2.5 years. I call it kind of the consequences of COVID.
Yeah.
I think might be a good way how to put it. And then we just have people, I think, just have more power. If you're a creator, you have more power now than ever before.
Yeah. I mean, you kind of see the trend where a lot of the bigger name artists are leaving Marvel and DC, and the lure of having those characters is not. I think with Marvel and DC, their thing is we'll promote the character first, like Spider-Man or Captain America, and then second we'll promote the writer, and then the artist is kind of like an afterthought, because when you give too much power to the artist, if you build them up too much, they can leave and compete against you. So that's kind of left a lot of artists who wanted to work for Marvel or DC. They would do a stint with them, but then quickly find out it's more rewarding to go off somewhere else. And it's very easy if you want to put out a comic and hire a great artist. Take your pick from Marvel and just pay them a little bit more than Marvel does. It's not that hard because, I'll tell you, like I was doing Nova for Marvel, like I don't know how long ago, like maybe 10, 15 years ago, I was on Nova, and it was doing really well, like the first few issues, and I was really into it. And then we just moved. I had a kid, and I had to renovate a kitchen in our house, and I didn't know how much renovations go for. Like the price had gone up substantially since I last renovated a kitchen, so I had a number in mind. But we're getting all of these quotes in that were 3 or 4 times what I remember them being. And I can build kitchens. It's one of the things that I learned because I kind of have my hands in a lot of different creative things. So I had to go tell Marvel that I have to get off of this book because I need to build a kitchen. Um, and they hated hearing that because like, what? How can you leave in the middle of a storyline? And I just felt like, well, I'm just doing some math in my head. It just doesn't. It would take my entire paycheck to give to these kitchen people who are not going to do a great job, and that shouldn't be something that happens because um, you're going to lose talent for any reason because the pay is too low, and you'll get substandard art. You'll get art from overseas or whatever, like however you can afford it, and a lot of times it just means hiring an artist that's not up to snuff, and that's what you have at Marvel now. Like if anyone there is really good, their page rate's probably pretty high, and then it's very easy to get them to go away to either Mark Millar or form these groups like Distillery or AWA. There's all these like groups forming together to kind of be mini publishers, and a lot of them are kind of creator first type things. And you won't get that from Marvel because Marvel's still going to continue to promote their character, their roster of characters that you don't have to pay. Like Spider-Man works for free because he's not real. So the problem there is that you see Marvel and DC, they're going to get, the art is going to get worse and worse, and the writing's going to get worse and worse.
Do you feel though that somebody might go like Scott Snyder? Scott was a good writer. I think he became a better writer at DC. Ran Batman. Got probably not paid what he should have been paid for it. Let's call it what it is. I don't think that's an insult. And then right at the top of Batman, he had one final hoorah, and then he left and formed his own thing after he got the clout, and now he's making real money. And he went on to do a bunch of comics, and he probably wrote a bunch of this stuff while writing Batman, and then he waited for the right moment where he was going to get a lot of money to form his independent publisher. And he had a bunch of deals, but obviously that's what happened. And now he's at Distillery and he's just in a bunch of different deals. I mean, I have my own thoughts on it. A bunch of people might disagree with me. I think a bunch of those deals are not as iron tight as people think they are. I think we're in for a shakeup in comics. I really do.
Yeah.
I think IDW is a signal. I think there's some other stuff going on that I can't that I've heard rumors about that I can't confirm whether they're true or not. But I think that, but obviously, I think that's what is going to happen. I think the next generation is going to spend 2 years, 3 years in DC, kind of build a little bit of a name, get their foot in the door, and then go elsewhere. And I think they're going to become a farm, and then I think DC is going to buy talent. I think that's what's going to happen. I think that's exactly what's going to happen. I think it's going to be the WWE model. I really do. I think they're going to buy talent, and you're going to spend a lot of money buying your competitor when they leave. WWE just did it with Jade Cardo. There's no question about it. And I think that's what's going to happen. And you're going to spend a lot of money to get that done. And I think that's where we're heading. That's just my thoughts.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I'll be honest. I'm a guy that is on the creative side, and I kind of almost always pride in not knowing how the business side works because I make the product. So I'm just kind of getting into it just kind of recently. I take no pleasure in watching Marvel and DC fail because I do think that they're necessary.
I take no pleasure in either, but you and me have different opinions on that because I'm a shareholder of both of those companies. It's terrible. It's terrible. I mean, I own Disney stock and I own WBD, so I take no pleasure in that, and also I understand that there are people who are not creators in those companies in Marvel and in DC. You have an accountant. And all of a sudden, if those companies go under, somebody who has a decent job could potentially lose their job, and they might find another job. But right now, the economy's jacked up.
Right.
I take no pleasure in that because
I also think that my being able to survive in this business as a comic book writer or artist or both really does need to be propped up by Marvel and DC being healthy because I do think that they keep the stores open and they keep the pipeline and the whole medium alive. And I want them to do really well. And I just think that some of the tactics they're taking are more short-term thinking because whoever's in charge is really there for a short time. and no one wants to do what it takes to really improve the industry over the next 20 years, because a lot of people not even going to be alive in 20 years, but let alone so
Chuck Dixon said something, because I interviewed Chuck Dixon, and what he said is one of the biggest mistakes of comics was getting them out of the grocery stores for $1 or $1.50,
yeah,
because you have
probably.
People's Magazine and you then had Archie right next to it. So little Johnny was good all throughout the supermarket shopping trip, and
Yeah,
mommy has no problem spending $1 or $2 or for a Spider-Man, because it shuts up Johnny in the car. And
yeah,
Johnny is good, and Johnny feels emboldened to behave, and it's positive reinforcement. And mommy feels comfortable that Johnny reading Spider-Man is not going to see Spider-Man snuffing Mary Jane. And you can interpret that any which way you want to interpret that. Interpret that, because it could mean a lot of things. But the point is that was one of the biggest mistakes. Is it killed a generation. It killed a generation on price and on accessibility. And I think it's an issue. And I think Chuck Dixon said that on my show almost 6 years ago. And I think that remains relevant. Whether you like Chuck Dixon or not, I don't think that's a disputable fact.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
I think it's just so interesting. But again, I mean, there's a lot of stuff. I could go on for hours about what's wrong with the industry, but I don't want to. I want the industry to be healthy. My objective in life is not to destroy the industry. It is to lift it up and make it better. And I want it to do better. I like Marvel and DC. I haven't bought a DC comic in almost a year. I have no desire to. There's one thing DC puts out that I care about. One thing. It's Justice League Ruby. That's it.
Okay.
It's not even canon. I just love the fact that you have these characters from an anime teaming up with the Justice League, dealing with problems. It's awesome. It's awesome because it's fun. It's fun. That's why I enjoy it. It's just fun, and it's written well. It's not written great. It's written like average, but it's fun. It takes me out of my world for 20 minutes. And that's what I want, because when I'm reading that book, I'm not thinking about other things. There's no politics in it. There's no good, bad things. There's nothing in this world. It is just a complete fantasy dissolving, like, therapeutic trip for me. Isn't that what comics are supposed to do?
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's not necessarily what my comic does, but that escapist. I mean, that's because my comic gives you stuff to think about when maybe you just want to chill out. People have said after they read it, it kind of sticks with them, and then it gets you thinking about AI, and it's not necessarily just that gives you a good time, but it gives you a lot to chew on. And I don't know if that's what people want, but that's what this comic does. So.
I mean, you raised almost $30,000+, so there's something to it. There's something to it.
I would say that when people read the first issue, a lot of times they say they set out to read the first issue to see what it's about, but they'll tear through the whole thing like binge watching something on Netflix at 3 a.m. when you have to go to work the next day. So it has that characteristic that's called like unputdownable, where you do end up really getting into the story, and I'm so thankful. That's the greatest compliment that I can get from readers. So
I completely get it. I've read a few of those books, and then it's like 4 a.m. and you're like, oh shit. Oh shit. I gotta be up in 2 hours. Oh shit. It's good. It's great. It's great. But anyway, we've been speaking for a while, almost 2 hours, and I appreciate it. I'm super excited. I'm very thankful that somebody reached out to me. It doesn't happen all that often. Again, I'm going to say it. Anybody can ask for an interview. Whether I accept you or I don't is completely in my discretion.
Well, I am honored that I made it. I made it, and it took an old Zenescope cover to do it, though. So.
But yes, it's a very good one. A very good one at that. Very hard one to pick it up. But anyway, I do want to give you a chance to promote yourself. So where can people find you, bother you, hit you up, check out your Kickstarter, check out your website, potentially get on your commission wait list, follow you on social media, all that fun stuff, because
Okay.
it's super important.
Well, okay. So really, the social media is my main, and one place is Instagram. So that's Instagram at Sean Chen Art. And right now I have a Kickstarter that's running, and I think it's running just for maybe like one more day. So yeah, please check it out. And if you're gonna back it, you gotta back it soon, because it'll be gone, and the exclusive print run will be that train will have left the building. So very soon you'll have to check it out. But I hope you do, because it's a wild, crazy story, and it's written with traditional storytelling techniques and processes. And I think you'll be really, really into it, because it's been reviewing very well. So.
And then I put the link for everybody who wants it in the description.
Cool.
So you could click that there. So obviously you could check it out there. And so that's something that's out there as well. Then as far as I'm concerned, and I've been saying it for a while now, you have to support indie. And what that means is you have to back people's campaigns. And it goes a long way. And obviously, whether it's $1, digital, physical, the whole shebang, whatever you want, you need to back it. And let's say this isn't your cup of tea, your money's tight. You can always share out a campaign. You can share it on your Facebook wall. You can share it on Instagram, TikTok. You could send it to somebody. That also goes a long way too.
Absolutely.
In a lot of ways. And it's sometimes even more helpful when you share out an interview, or not an interview, a Kickstarter. Or you should share interviews too, but it goes a long way. And also, obviously, if this is not your cup of tea, but something that Sean does that you do want, like a commission or something like a print or something that he runs, or you see him at a con, that is something also where you can support artists, not necessarily by backing their Kickstarters, but buying their other products or picking up commissions or other things from them, because that indirectly supports them. Because obviously not everything everybody does is everybody's cup of tea. So that's something to keep in everybody's head. And then as far as I'm concerned, I'm Pop Anime Comics on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. On YouTube, I am Pop Anime Comics. I appreciate when people subscribe to my YouTube channel. I have a lot of content out there. I'm always adding new content every day, anywhere from 2 to 3 videos. So there's always content for people there. I got some really, really trippy content coming out probably in November. Very cool interview. It's probably not safe for work, so don't watch it at work. And then I have some pretty cool interviews coming out. I have David Boer coming tomorrow. He's coming on the show. And then I have Kenna Valentina's coming on. And then I got a few other people next week coming on potentially. So you never know who's coming on. You never know what wrestler's coming on. You never know who's going to be there. So obviously that's out there. Also, I have Buy Me a Coffee if you would like to support me in this show. You don't have to. If you're looking for sponsorships, everybody, happy to have that discussion as well. So obviously that's everything out there. And I appreciate when people support, Kickstarters in my show. And the best way I do that is to follow me on social media and check out what I do and watch a video or two of mine and share it out. So that's everything that I got. And I figured I'd give you the final word.
Oh, please check out Evermind on Kickstarter. It's me, Sean Chen, and Daniel Wu. We put it together. It's a great project, and it's about to end. So please at least check it out and see whether it's for you. Pick a tier that's just for you. So.
Well, I don't think I could have said that any better myself, everybody. And that is a